She looked down at the menu, her fingers trembling slightly, and whispered the words that nearly shattered the fragile courage she had gathered all week. She said she could not afford this date. The restaurant lights glowed softly above them, glasses clinked in the background, and the world seemed to pause around her quiet confession. It was not embarrassment alone in her eyes. It was fear. The fear of being judged. The fear of being less. The fear of not being enough. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in people who choose compassion over pride, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this deserve to be heard. Emma had almost canceled 3 times. She stood outside the restaurant for 10 full minutes before walking in, clutching her small purse as if it carried more than a worn-out wallet and a tube of lipstick. She was 28, working 2 part-time jobs, barely keeping up with rent after helping her younger brother through college. Dating had never been a priority. Surviving had been. Across the table sat Daniel, a 34-year-old single father whose life had been split into 2 eras, before the accident and after it. Before, he had been a husband, a homeowner, a man with predictable routines. After, he was a widower raising a 5-year-old daughter named Lily, learning how to braid hair from online tutorials and how to quiet nightmares that were not always his own. Emma had met Daniel at a community book drive. He was kneeling on the floor, helping Lily stack children's books into neat piles, his patience evident in the gentle way he corrected her crooked stacks. Emma noticed him not because he was the loudest or the most confident, but because he seemed steady. Grounded. The kind of man who listened before speaking. When he asked her out, she hesitated. She had never dated a single father before. She worried about complications, about not being enough for someone who had already built and lost a life. But there was something sincere in his eyes that made her say yes. Now, sitting in a restaurant far nicer than any place she had been in years, she realized she had made a mistake. She had assumed it would be coffee or a casual diner. Instead, white tablecloths stretched across polished tables, and the menu prices felt like accusations. She had done the math before coming. After rent, electricity, groceries, and sending money to her brother, she had less than $40 to last the week. Pride had kept her from mentioning it earlier. Pride, and the desire to feel normal for once. When she finally whispered that she could not afford this date, she expected disappointment. Maybe irritation. Maybe that subtle shift in expression that says you are not what I thought you were. Daniel did not react the way she feared. He did not laugh. He did not insist she was overthinking. He did not wave it off as if money were trivial. Instead, he looked at her the way he looked at Lily when she admitted she had broken something important, without anger, without judgment, just careful attention. He closed the menu and gently set it aside. Then he told her that he had not invited her to impress her with a restaurant. He had invited her because he admired her heart. He explained that he had chosen this place thoughtlessly, out of habit from a life he used to live, not realizing it might make her uncomfortable. And then he suggested they leave. At first, she thought he was embarrassed. But he stood, smiled warmly, and said there was a food truck down the street that served the best grilled cheese sandwiches in the city. He said Lily and he went there sometimes on Fridays, and it had become their little tradition. Emma felt something inside her chest loosen. They walked out together, leaving behind crystal glasses and soft music. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of rain. The food truck was brightly lit, with a small line of customers laughing and waiting for their orders. Daniel ordered 2 sandwiches and a shared basket of fries. He paid without ceremony, without pride, without making her feel indebted. They sat on a wooden bench under a flickering street lamp. There were no white tablecloths. No polished floors. Just warm bread, melted cheese, and conversation that felt real. Emma told him about her father losing his job when she was 16, about watching her mother cry quietly at the kitchen table over unpaid bills. She spoke of how she had learned early that money was fragile and security was temporary. She admitted that she hated feeling like a burden to anyone. Daniel listened. Truly listened. Then he told her about the hospital room where he had said goodbye to his wife. He described holding Lily in his arms while trying to understand how to be both parents at once. He confessed that for a long time, he had felt guilty for even thinking about dating again. He said loneliness was a heavy thing, but pretending it did not exist was heavier. Their grilled cheese sandwiches grew cold as they talked. That night did not end with a dramatic kiss or grand declarations. It ended with a hug that lasted a little longer than expected and a promise to see each other again. Over the next few weeks, their dates were simple. Walks in the park. Coffee on a bench. A trip to the local library with Lily, where Emma watched Daniel patiently help his daughter sound out difficult words. Emma began to see the quiet strength in him, not loud heroism, but daily devotion. But Emma's struggles did not disappear. One evening, after a particularly exhausting double shift, she found an eviction notice taped to her apartment door. A clerical error at one of her jobs had delayed her paycheck, and she was short by $200. $200 might as well have been $2,000. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the paper, feeling that familiar panic rise in her throat. She thought about calling Daniel. Then she stopped herself. She did not want to become another responsibility in his already full life. The next day, she canceled their plans, claiming she felt sick. Daniel sensed something was wrong but did not push. 3 days later, he showed up at her workplace with Lily, who ran into Emma's arms with the innocent enthusiasm only children possess. Daniel's eyes searched Emma's face, and he gently asked her to take a short break. They stood outside in the cool evening air, and Emma finally broke. She told him about the eviction notice, about the delayed paycheck, about how tired she was of always being one mistake away from disaster. Daniel did not offer money. Instead, he asked her what she needed. No one had asked her that in years. She did not need rescue. She needed support. She needed someone to believe she could stand on her own without shame. Daniel helped her draft an email to her landlord explaining the situation. He sat beside her as she called her manager to clarify the payroll issue. He watched Lily while Emma picked up an extra shift at the bookstore. When her paycheck finally came through and the rent was paid, Emma felt a quiet victory, not because someone had saved her, but because someone had stood beside her. Weeks turned into months. Lily began asking if Emma would come to her school recital. Emma began keeping a spare toothbrush at Daniel's house. Yet challenges still lingered. Some nights Daniel would withdraw into silence, memories of his wife casting long shadows. Emma sometimes wondered if she was living in someone else's unfinished story. One evening, after Lily had fallen asleep, Daniel admitted he feared loving again because love had once left him broken. Emma confessed she feared loving someone with a past because she did not know how to compete with memories. They did not try to erase the past. They chose to honor it. Daniel showed Emma old photo albums, not to compare, but to include her in the truth of his life. Emma shared childhood pictures of her cramped apartment and her family's resilience. Their relationship was not built on wealth or grand gestures. It was built on small acts of showing up. A year after their first date, Daniel took Emma back to the same restaurant where she had once whispered that she could not afford it. This time, he did not make it a surprise. He told her in advance, and she smiled knowingly. When they sat at the table, she felt different. Not richer in money, but richer in confidence. She had secured a full-time position at the bookstore. She had started saving. She no longer saw herself as someone constantly on the brink of falling. Before ordering, Daniel reached into his pocket and placed something on the table. It was not a ring. It was a small drawing Lily had made. 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Daniel explained that Lily had drawn it after asking if Emma would always be part of their Fridays. He said he did not want to rush anything, but he wanted Emma to know she was already part of their world. Tears blurred her vision. She realized then that the night she had whispered about not affording the date had not been a moment of weakness. It had been a test of character. And Daniel had passed in the simplest, most powerful way, by choosing understanding over ego. If this story is touching your heart, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to believe in love again, and comment below where you're watching from. Your support keeps stories like this alive. And before we reach the end, I have a special request. Comment the word kindness if you believe that the smallest acts of compassion can change someone's entire life. Years later, Emma would look back on that first date not with embarrassment, but with gratitude. She would remember the flickering street lamp, the melted cheese, and the way a man chose humility over pride. She would remember that love does not always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives with a paper napkin, a shared bench, and a question, "What do you need?" Daniel eventually did give her a ring. Not in a grand ballroom or under a spotlight, but in their kitchen, while Lily spun in circles nearby. It was simple, just like their beginning. Emma never forgot the feeling of being seen in her most vulnerable moment and not being judged. And Daniel never forgot that strength sometimes looks like admitting you cannot afford something, and discovering that the right person will never measure your worth by the price of dinner. If this story moved you even a little, if it reminded you of someone who chose kindness when they did not have to, please engage with this video. Like it, share it, subscribe, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Your interaction might be the encouragement someone else is waiting for. Because in a world obsessed with appearances and price tags, the most valuable thing we can offer each other is understanding. And sometimes, the most beautiful love stories begin with the bravest words, "I cannot afford this."